Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me this evening is a phenomenal woman that I've had the pleasure of knowing for a little while now. She's a transformation coach, speaker, author, wife, mom, but her most important role of all is that she's a woman of God. She's taken time out of a very busy schedule to hang out with us this evening with the hopes of sharing a bit of her story to inspire, to encourage, to uplift others, especially as it comes to dealing with our adversities and challenges of life, hoping to shed some light on better ways, best practices, if you will, on how to navigate those times and difficult moments in our lives in a way that is positive, locked in, and focused, but most importantly, relying upon God along the way. So it is my privilege and honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you our special guest this evening, Miss Dwan Abrams. Dwan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Glad we finally got this to take place. We've been working
Me?
on it. We're here, and the moment has arrived, and I'm excited to hear more about your journey and your story. I know you're going to bless me and my listeners, so I've been looking forward to this evening. So I'm really excited to get another layer of who you are. I already know some fabulous things about you, but I know that there's more to share. So I'm
Thanks.
excited about that. So before we jump into our segments, though, I do want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit with our audience, a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, kind of give them a taste of who is Dwan Abrams.
Sure. Let's see here. I am a person who wears many hats, has a diverse background. I have done quite a few things, but passion, whatever leads me. So I started out in corporate America like most people. I was there for like 9 years. And I remember seeing something that said if you get to the 10th year, you're not likely to leave. And it made me feel like, do I want to be a person who retires from something 20, 30 years in, or do I want to live out loud? And that was a big turning point for me because I was in the Air Force for 4 years and I came from a military background with my parents. My mom, my stepdad were both in the Army. So I joined the Air Force. And even then, I had a discipline, but people would say to me, do you want to stay in? You'd be a great lifer. And that didn't appeal to me. I didn't want to wear a uniform every day for 20, 30 years or whatever the case might be. I just couldn't see it. I felt that my path was something else. And even though I did very well when I was in the military, I got promoted early. I was recognized with quite a few awards. I even was at a very young age having like lunch with our base commander. So here I am, this little airman, and just meeting with like the colonel and just having conversations. And that was just a big part of who I was. So even when I transitioned into corporate America, it was just like, okay, I can do this for a while, but that 10-year mark was pivotal for me not to reach it. So I took a severance package and left out of corporate America and never looked back. And I've not ever worked in corporate America ever again. And that was many years ago when my daughter was little. So I think, as a matter of fact, it might have been shortly after she was born that I made that decision. So now let's fast forward to many years later. I became a college professor where that didn't feel like work at all. That was something I absolutely loved. And so I did that for some years, and that propelled me to get higher education. When you work in education, then all of a sudden it's like things you didn't think about, they just come to pass, like educationally. So I remember my students, my name's Dwan. So I would write the letter D on the board, and they would always call me doctor. And I was like, it doesn't stand for doctor. It's just the abbreviation of my first name. But my students were like, no, to me, you're doctor. So they just all started calling me doctor. And I guess they spoken into existence because sure enough, I went back to school and got a doctorate degree in psychology. And now I'm Dr. Dwan. And I work in true crime. Ironically, I started with that because I used to be a fan of the ID channel. I loved all things to true crime, like a lot of women do. It was one of those things I could turn to the ID channel and watch it all day. Like literally, I didn't have to watch anything else. It was just whatever was on the ID channel was good TV programming to me. And I remember watching it one day and saying, when I would see the experts on there, and I would think, I could do that. And sure enough, one day a producer approached me because they were like a person who read my books, and in some of my fiction novels I would always have like a true crime element to it, like a stalker or things like that. Had no idea that a producer would read my books and want to approach me about being a true crime expert. And it started out so funny because at that time I was doing journalist work, like in terms of writing articles. And I had numerous things that were published, even in print publications, like some popular national magazines and so forth. And so to me, it was like, well, okay, I could be the journalist on this. And that's how I started out. But then she's like, don't you have a background in psychology? And I'm like, yeah, I actually do. And then she's like, hey, I think we could use that. And so then all of a sudden, I started back in 2019. The first show that I did was For My Man on TV1. And after that, it quickly went into something else where producers started requesting me on their shows, on their segments, wanting to work with me. And then it went into something else where I started appearing on, let's see, Fatal Attraction, Celebrity Crime Files, also on TV1. So just, just kind of rolled into something else. But they would also tell me that I was so comfortable in front of the camera that they wanted me to coach some of their on-air talent so they wouldn't be as nervous, or how to prepare for the segments and so forth. So that's what I do. I do the true crime. I'm still in that, very much so. I love helping people. That's the psychology background in me. And so that's where the transformational coach comes in. I have one daughter. She's about to graduate from college with the highest honors. She's made the president's list ever since she's been there. She'll be 22 years old in May, and she graduates from college in May with her bachelor's degree. So, very happy with that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
That's it. That's pretty much it. Like you said, you wear many hats and just really doing some phenomenal work. And to my
Thank you.
listeners, if you've been looking at her just in the first few minutes and wondering, have I seen her before? Where do I know her from? See, she kind of told you, so now you're gonna be like locked in. For those of you who watch the different shows that she spoke of on TV1, you're like, oh yeah, I remember seeing her before. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. I love again, how you're using all your gifts and your talents to
Thank
pour
you.
into other people. And it's not just you just being out here on TV, just doing TV just for your own personal gain, but
Right.
again, you are out here blessing other people. And this is how our journeys can transform, if you will, because a lot of things that go on earlier on in life, which is what I want to kind of tap into now, is we don't always recognize or understand certain events, certain encounters with people or what have you, how all of those things are going to come into play, even to what you said earlier about just and I love that fact too, that you learned early on. You know what, I don't you may I don't want to be corporate, America, if you will, for life. I don't want to be military, if
Come
you will,
on.
for life. Not that you didn't excel in those various respects, but that's a thing I believe. Well, I know, that when God is working in you and trying to lead you into your purpose, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter, per se what you're good at. It's what were you created to do. And so he'll open up those pathways for you to, he'll give you those nudges, if you will, that says, you know what, this is cool what you've been doing, but this is not the end of your story. There's other chapters to it. There's other layers to it. And I'm glad that you pursued those and you
Thank
followed your heart, and again, you allowed God to lead you accordingly, and look at all the great things that you're doing and continue to do. You're not even done yet. It's just one level after another after another. So that's pretty awesome. See, you're already blessing us, and we just in the very beginnings of it all here. So, but with that said, I do want to take a time out to tap into the beginnings for you, because
you.
I do believe that as we get older and as we reflect back, we begin to connect the dots as to what happened as early as childhood, and it all starts to begin to make sense later on in life, in present day, as to, again, why we had to go
Mhm.
through what we had to go through, or the people or encounters that we experienced. So with that said, if you would tell us, what was it like for you growing up? Fond
Mhm.
memories that you have about growing up, as well as if there's any particular challenges that come to mind, you can share those as well. Kind of give us the foundational basis for where your story begins.
Sure, absolutely. My parents were teenagers when I was born. My mom got pregnant at 16, had me at 17. My dad was 19 when I was born, and it was very different in terms of they were in a relationship with each other, but they never married each other. So with teenage parents, there's just natural things that come along with that. There's a certain level of just wanting my own solid family, wanting traditional things. And, even for years, it was just like, gosh, that's embarrassing. Is that normal? Like, for two people not to have been married and have me, that kind of thing. So, it just was that type of situation. But what I will tell you is I was surrounded by so much love when I was growing up. I was the first grandchild on my mom's side, with my grandmother. My mom's the oldest of seven, and all of her brothers and sisters. Since she's the oldest, everybody was still in the house essentially when I was born. So I was around my aunts and uncles who were like my big brothers and big sisters. They look after me. They love me dearly. I mean, and we're still very close to this day with all of them. So our relationships are very special. So those early things of having that love with such a big family, even though I was technically an only child, my grandmother also embraced me as her one of her little ones. Like wherever my grandmother went, I was right there. It was just that type of thing. We had the most special relationship. And her kids even would joke and say, that you're her favorite, right? Like her favorite person in the world. And I always called my grandmother Mother. That's what I called her. Everyone called her Mother. She was just a really nurturing person. So, to me, it was just, I was surrounded by love and very protected. I wasn't someone who grew up getting into fights or being bullied or any of that kind of stuff. I was very protected and very loved. I can say that. And also, too, even with my dad, he was very present when I was a little girl when I lived in Florida until my mom got married. And then we left the country. So that was a whole different situation when I got a few years older when she joined the military and we left altogether. But in that meantime, I have just a big extended family. So that's pretty much how my growing up was.
Love that. Love that. Anytime that you can, hear stories like this, especially, when you talk about, being a child of teen parents, and in this particular case, we're talking about black teen parents, and the
Hmm.
stereotypes that go with that. You know how the script is always written out that this will never work, that, the
Hmm.
life of that child will be a train wreck, if you will. They'll forever be in this, cycle of despair, but yet here
Right.
you are, sharing, that, regardless of what the world, likes to script about us in
Hmm.
situations like that, we are very resilient people, and you're somebody who's a living testimony of being a product of a loving family, an extended loving family, where everybody just kind of, like you said,
Hmm.
embraced and poured in and nurtured one
Yeah.
another. So it doesn't surprise me, again, which is why I like to have these conversations. It doesn't surprise me that the things and the works that you do now, whether it be on TV or whether it be in coaching or whether it be in the writings of your books, that
Hmm.
you are, again, you're just a natural nurturer, because that's what you came to know. That's what you grew up in. So it was like it was embedded in you. And while I'm sure you appreciated having that love and protection,
Hmm.
you have no idea early on in life how that's going to transform, who you will become ultimately in your later years, in your adult years, and how God will use that same nurturing spirit and
Hmm.
elevate it to where you now are reaching people that are outside of your family circle and impacting and changing their lives. So, that's I
Absolutely.
love to hear that. This is
Thank
beautiful
you.
stuff. So, great,
Hmm.
great, absolutely. So, Dewan, as we go through our childhoods, regardless of how great or how challenging they may be, and as we embark into our adulthood, the experiences of life continue to come our way. Some are really awesome and great, and we're glad that we're finally grown and experiencing them. And then, there are going to be some experiences that we would equate with being the storms of life. And even the storms have levels.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just the minor day to day lifing type stuff. But every now and
Hmm.
then, if we live long enough, you get hit with some storms that sort of just kind of take the breath out. Speed. It's kind of a gut punch, if you will. So much
Yeah.
so that when you're going through that particular moment, you might actually find yourself questioning, how am I going to get through this? Even if you're normally good at navigating, out of challenging situations, everybody
Mhm.
gets something that's a little bit heavier, a little bit more burdensome and weighty than what they're accustomed to dealing with. And you can feel that sense of hopelessness, that sense of helplessness, you know, not having really any answers as to how you're going to come up out of that situation. So, with that said, if you would, tell us about a time that that's exactly how you felt, that you were dealing with a situation in life that weighed heavily on you. You didn't know, you didn't how you were going to get up out of that, how you were going to overcome it. It felt very overwhelming, very trapping, if you will. Obviously, you're
Mhm.
here today to share it, so we can trust God made a way. But maybe back then, you had your doubts, you had your fears, maybe concerns and anxieties. Um, what was that situation like for you, and what was ultimately the turning point when you began to see some light and coming up out of that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Years back, it was probably right at a time when I just gotten out of the military. I was just fresh out of the Air Force, and I had finished like my first 3 years of college. So I was going into my fourth year of college at a university. And I had just gotten back off of a vacation in California visiting my dad. And so when I went back to like register for a class or something, there was this man there who was speaking at the school. And I was rushing out, but this lady was like, "Hey, you really want to hear him? You know, he's really good. He's got a radio spot and he's a speaker." And she's like, "Come on in here and listen." So I showed up late and I walked in and he stopped and he paused for a moment and then, he continued on. But after his like session was over, I was in the back of the room. So I rushed out and he rushed out behind me and he introduced himself to me and he asked me for my phone number and all that stuff. And, so I gave it to him. And as soon as I made it home, my phone was ringing and he asked me out on a date. So I went out on a date with him. And when I mean, it was like he listened to everything. Like I was just like he was at that time, like almost my therapist. Like I was just pouring so much out and I was just telling him so much stuff. And I was like, I am usually not this open of a book, but I had just poured out so much. He was so easy to talk to because he just was listening. And when I went home, I told my mom, I was like, "Mom, I think I met your son in law today." And she was like, "What?" Because I had never said that to anybody before because I was not a person who even wanted to get married. And I definitely wasn't, thinking like that. So, probably about mm, a week of us talking every day, he told me that he loved me. And it really scared me. And I was like, this is moving too fast because I don't feel this way about this person, especially not in a week. And, I was young, of course. And so basically, what ended up happening was 3 months after we knew each other, he proposed to me. And I was like, a reluctant yes, but I said yes. We lived in different states. So it was a long distance relationship for a while. I wasn't thinking about marrying him. I didn't really think he was my person anymore. The more I got to know him, because I started seeing he was really very insecure and possessive. As a matter of fact, he was the first situation in my life that ever made me have to go to counseling. So I found a counselor on my college campus and went and talked to him and was telling him everything that was going on. And this counselor was like, "Do not marry this guy. It's not going to end well for you. It's not going to be a good situation." And I just was like, but he loves me so much because at this point he had told me that he loved me more than anyone he had ever loved in his life. And at that point he said he loved me even more than his own mother and that he didn't have good relationships with his family, but he loved my family, the closeness of it with my extended family. Because at this time, I was spending holidays with my grandmother at her house and all my aunts and uncles. So he saw the love that I had experienced my whole life, and he wanted a part of that. Well, after a couple years, he gave me an ultimatum. He said, "Either you marry me or we're done." So, against my own better judgment, I went along with it and said, "Hey, you know what? Okay, we can do it," because we were like he was easy to talk to, and I just kind of, I had a conversation with one of my aunts, and she was just like, it's not easy to find a man who just wants to get married, So if he wants to get married, you should. And so I started thinking in my young mind, well, I'm not really ready to get married, but what if when I'm ready to get married, nobody wants to marry me? Or what if, I never find anybody who loves me like this again? I wasn't thinking about how I felt about him. I was thinking about the level of his intensity and how much he seemed to love me. But I started having dreams like up to 2 weeks. 2 weeks before our wedding, I started having these dreams telling me I was marrying the wrong person. It was like this forewarning. And finally I told my mom, I said, Mom, I think I'm marrying the wrong person. And she says, maybe I think you just got cold feet. It's just your nerves. Because at this point, everybody in my family really loved him. They thought he was this great guy. And they thought he'd be great for me, that he would take care of me, that he would just do all this stuff. Well, let's fast forward. I ended up marrying him, and it was the worst decision of my life. It was the worst decision of my life. And I still, when I look back at it, it was the biggest learning lesson that I ever encountered because it taught me so much about myself. It taught me about my boundaries. It taught me what to look out for and how to help other people, women, my daughter, everything, because the signs were always there. And I ignored those red flags. I did not stop and assess the situation and say, well, what does this really mean if someone's telling you a weekend that they love you? What does this mean if someone 3 months out, they don't even live in the same city as you and they're, telling you that they want to marry you? But the things that were really not in alignment were that he would harass me and he would stalk me before we got married. That's why I ended up in therapy talking to this counselor because he was confusing me. This man was confusing me. His words were saying one thing and he was putting so much love on me. He was love bombing the heck out of me. He was just, you're my everything and is this. And so in my mind, it was confusing all of this to be this needed, this wanted, this desired. And it really just did a number on me emotionally. And when I married him, it was just like, oh my goodness, you're in this. But then there was this one voice in the back of my mind is you can always get out of it. You don't have to do this. Like you can always get out of it. Well, we argued every day of our relationship. We argued every single day. And at some point, my family didn't even know this, but it turned violent. Like it turned violent. I remember when the first time that we had this really explosive argument and it got really nasty. I mean, we both just were like going back. Then all of a sudden, I just remember him slapping me. He's the only man that's ever put his hands on me in that way in my entire life. And I just remember being shocked. And then when he slapped me, he pinned me on the bed and he continued to slap me on the bed. And I don't even know if we were even a year into this marriage. And I just remembered that I was so shocked and disgusted. And I remember spitting in his face. And I was like, we are done. I'm done with you. And he begged, he pleaded, he cried. And I was like, he's really sorry. He's like, I'll never put my hands on you again. I'll never do this again. And so I didn't divorce him or anything at that time. And I just remember that I didn't like him the same anymore because then things started coming out. Like we'd have these conversations. And I remembered that I had asked him before we got married about a woman when he had told me something about an ex girlfriend of his. He suspected that she was cheating on him and he kicked her door in and did all this. Again, more flags before I even married him.
Hmm.
And I just remember something was off. And I asked him a question about, did you ever cheat on me before we got married? And he was like, no, no, I never cheated on you before we got married. It's like, okay. But I didn't believe it. So one day, because I told him straight up, I said, because if I knew that you did, I wouldn't have married you. Because I already had these questions. Let's just say that. I already was
Hmm.
feeling a certain kind of way. And that would have been like the justification. That would have been the icing on the cake if I knew that. And he knew that. Well, come to find out, a couple years into the relationship, he admits he was feeling guilty because by now he's like, he's a minister. He's, all of this. He's, when I married him, he was becoming a licensed minister. And it was just like, he's like, I promise we won't have a church. I don't want to be a pulpit like type of situation. I want a church without walls or whatever. So at this point, he's getting deeper into this and he comes clean and tells me that he did. And at this point, I'm livid because I'm just like, I've been going through this with you for all this time and I didn't even have to because not only did I think that you loved me so much, but come to find out, you're just like any other guy. You cheated on me, before we even got married, and I wouldn't have married you. And now I'm feeling duped. I'm feeling a certain kind of way. Again, I never shared any of this with my family because they just, I'm a private person. I keep all this to myself. And, I was just suffering in silence. And lo and behold, some years after, we're together, let's just fast forward, things are just taking just going from bad to worse. Okay. And we're just going down, down, down. And years go by and people are like, start asking, well, when are you guys planning on having kids? How come you want to have kids? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I would never have kids with this man because the only way that I can keep my sanity and stay in this relationship is if we don't have kids. Like, no, we're not. We're that childless couple, and we were doing that by design. And kids were not even a factor for me. So at some point, I started going to counseling again. And we went to marriage counseling. It didn't help. I went to individual counseling and it strengthened me. And finally, I just said, I want out of this situation. So I started praying to God every day to give me the strength, to show me what I needed to do, to help me to be able to move out of this situation. And during that time that I was preparing to divorce him, I literally was like, I don't know what to do with myself. I really was just so emotionally charged, but knowing what I was doing, but I was moving in secret. Like only my closest friends knew, that I was leaving him and all of this because I didn't know what he would do. I didn't know what he would do. And somehow in this, I ended up being the villain in this relationship at the end because I ended up meeting someone else and I was leaving him. And when I met someone else, I didn't expect to meet someone else, but I ended up falling in love with somebody else. So I filed for a divorce from him. Well, lo and behold, he wasn't taking that lying down, and I confided in someone and they told him. So while he was leaving and moving out and doing all of this, he decides he goes and gets a permit for a gun. He starts traveling with an axe in the trunk of his car. He starts following me, starts doing all of this. And while in the midst of all of this breakup, my life was literally in danger. So I moved my mom into my house, had her come stay with me, and he attacked me while my mom was in the house. And she was like, get off of her, leave her alone, get out. At that point, he had no option. He had to go. And then while all of this, there was another time, an incident where another family member had to step in because we were moving from one location to a next. This was before we had a house together. We had an apartment. We're moving from one location to the next. And I had said something to him like, I'm sick of this. I have somewhere I can go. And he just spazzed out and started choking me and all of this. And my cousin is like, man, look, I like you, but I will kill you. I will take you down about this one. You can never put your hands on her. Now, mind you, I just gave you 3 separate instances of when this man has put his hands on me. And the people in my general family, my extended family, they had no idea that any of this was going on. They just thought, wow, she's breaking up with a good dude. This man loves her. Why would she do this? They just saw us taking trips together to know how much we were fighting all the time, how much, what was going on behind those closed doors. And ultimately, when I did get divorced from him, it was a tremendous relief, but I felt so much stress. I felt so much stress because I had moved on. And, there was the perception of, oh, Dwan, you didn't do this right. You didn't do this right. Why you leave that man? Like as though it appeared I left him for someone else, but that wasn't the situation. I had years and I was already preparing to divorce and leave him. It was just the timing of, hey, you can't control when you just meet a human on the street or whatever. Well, what I will say is that chance encounter ended up saving my life because he's been my husband now for all these years. And we have a daughter together. And we've been in a relationship for 25 years. And our daughter is 21, almost 22 years old. And, we don't have those kind of issues. So the first one was traumatic. It was so traumatizing for me as a person. And I stayed in therapy through those years. When I tell you it wasn't just one therapist, I can't even remember. I lost track of how many therapists I sat in there and crying and talking and doing all this. And they're just like, do you not know who you are? Like, in terms of, you know, that you're a strong woman, you've got a lot going for yourself. You can actually take care of yourself. You don't have to go through this. But then at the same time, I was a Christian person. I was a Christian, and I was just like, it shouldn't be this hard. I thought I was being punished. Like, why am I, I didn't know what I was being punished for, but I felt like it. I was trying to make rationalizations and justifications and excuses for why I was going through this, because I had never been in a relationship like that before, where someone was abusing me psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it, where it was just, to a point where I was just like, I really can't take this, and what's really funny about that situation now is that if my friends or if my family, I'm not concerned about my friends because my friends would know, but if my family members see this, they'd probably be shocked because they still follow him on social media. They still think, oh, he's, this guy or, just whatever, because I never tarnished his reputation or image to them. I never shared the depths. If they weren't there physically, like my mom was, or my cousin that saw it happen, I didn't just go randomly talking about it because, again, I'm a private person and, I have my limitations and boundaries with how much I'm willing to share. But with your show, I'm sharing this for the first time publicly ever, simply because I feel like it could help somebody else, get out or don't get in it. When you see the flags, don't get in it. And when you do see the flags, don't be afraid to get out because it doesn't get better. It just gets worse. And, nobody knows your story and your journey and what you've actually really been through to get to where you are. So, people see the relationship I'm in now and they just think it's, it's a model relationship. Like in my family, they're like, wow, you guys been together the longest of anybody other than like my great uncle and his wife. They've been married for a really long time. Other than them, my husband and I are that next thing. And, it's beautiful to be able to see it, but people don't know that he's not the only husband I had. He's the second husband I had, but it's the first one that worked out and was done right.
Wow. Well, let me first say thank you for your transparency and sharing as you have. And I'm thankful that my platform allowed you to feel comfortable to
Mhm,
share as you've shared. I don't take that lightly at all. This is when I ask people to, in this segment of the shows, I'm not looking, for shock TV, reality TV type moments. And I never know going in what that person is
mhm,
going to share and how they're even going to be led to share. So but what you did share, like you stated, very important, very critical, because there have been many of us, both men and women, who
mhm.
have gotten the signs that a relationship was not in alignment. That there was an unhealthiness to it.
Right.
That there was an imbalance to it. And that's not about anybody being perfect, because none of us are.
Mhm,
We even in coming to a marriage, we all are. We all got our baggage. We all got our issues and our challenges. So nobody comes in clean and flawless. But
absolutely.
there is a yeah, but there are some things that again are those red flags, those triggers that come about that kind of let
Mhm.
hey, you might want to rethink this. There's
Yeah.
certain things that instinctively that come to your mind, and I've been, as you were sharing your story, because I've been previously married before too, and I got
Mhm.
signs
Oh,
that
yes.
said that this should not you should not go through with that. But
Mhm.
I allowed my pride,
Yes.
and I even used the excuse that you brought it up earlier, that I think you said your aunt said, the
Mhm.
cold feet excuse.
Yep.
It's just cold feet. It's just
Mhm.
this. You try to
Yes.
rationalize because you want everything to play out the way you wanted it, wanted it to
Right.
go.
Yeah.
You had the big wedding in mind and all the family and the friends, and what if I
Mhm.
pass out? What if I'm wrong and I pass up on this person that I think is the one, and I find out that they're not, and then what happens
Right.
then? Am I destined to be lonely for the rest of my life? And a lot of
Oh,
that
yeah.
has to do with us not only manufacturing these stories in our head that aren't not necessarily going to be our true reality. But it's
Exactly.
also it also, and you brought this up, it's also us, not truly understanding our value,
There you go.
not truly understanding our worth, feeling
Mm-hmm.
like as if the first person who tells us that we cute, that they love
Mm-hmm.
us, and that we're the best of everything, and they don't love nobody ever
Right.
loved anybody better than you, and all that. If we
Mm-hmm.
don't understand our value and our worth, we will eat that up, and
Absolutely.
and and we'll hang on to it even to our demise in terms of subjecting
Mm-hmm.
ourselves to, as you shared, emotional, mental, physical
Mm-hmm.
abuse. We'll do that, and we'll continue to justify it over and
Absolutely.
over again. And so
Yes.
I know my listeners, um, if not all of them, most of them have been in situations like that where we've tried to make something be in a relationship that just wasn't there, instead of having that trust
Mm-hmm.
and confidence in ourselves, and just walking away knowing that
Yeah.
this doesn't mean that's not the only person in life that's ever going to be drawn to you, to be attracted to you, that will,
Yeah.
and on top of that, that there are some people who will not only be attracted to you, but they're going to actually treat you right, that they're going to
There-
actually do, do you in a, honor you in a way, I should say, that is of the highest level, of the highest standard, of the highest respect. One of
Mm-hmm.
the things that you mentioned as you were sharing your story, you talked about, and I love this, not so much as you had to go through what you go through, but this is a testament to who God is, how He
Mm-hmm.
can take some of our most darkest seasons in life, and He can bless us in those seasons. And so, like with you in this
Absolutely.
case, he didn't
Mm-hmm.
just bless you with ultimately finding somebody who would treat you the right way, but He
Yes.
blessed you in terms of the lessons that you were able to learn, because you said yourself, I had an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to really do some deep assessments of me,
Yes.
and you use key words like, where are my boundaries at? Because see, when
Absolutely.
we let people treat, as the old
Mm-hmm.
saying goes, we teach people how to treat us. When we,
Right.
that's
Yes.
okay to teach people how to treat us, but we want to make sure we're teaching them how to treat us as it aligns with our boundaries. This is
There
what
you
I
go.
will not stand for, and
That's
this
right.
is what I don't care how much you could tell me you love me 1,000
Mm-hmm.
times. I'm not
Yeah.
even saying that you can't do something to me that is out of
Mm-hmm.
line and that I can't forgive you for it.
Right.
But
Right.
if you violate this, I
Mm-hmm.
could still forgive you and still walk away from you too. you know,
Absolutely.
and a lot
Absolutely.
and even
Yeah.
to that, that's necessary, because in your own way, you kind of said, you kind of through your, I would suggest, I guess I would surmise that through your therapy sessions and just through you
Mm-hmm.
having some self-reflection, there had to be a point even where you had to forgive him, not so much to say that you
Mm-hmm.
condone his behavior, but
Right.
forgive him from the standpoint that in order for you to move on, in order for you to heal, you had to
Mm-hmm.
get to a place where this no longer haunted you anymore, that this is no longer something that
Oh
was a
yeah.
stronghold for you.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have been able to thrive in what is now your 25 plus year marriage if you had not
Right.
taken that opportunity to do so. He could have been the
Absolutely.
greatest guy in the world, but you wouldn't have been ready for him because
Right.
you were
Yes.
still stewing with all this other stuff
Mm-hmm.
that you hadn't addressed inside.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course, I don't mean that it's funny or anything. It is ironic, however, that some
Mm-hmm.
of the stuff that you do today, and I kind of was wondering as you were sharing that, like when you do like these true crime and Fatal Attraction and stuff like that, you're playing roles on
Absolutely.
TV that
I'm
in
trying.
many ways mimic some real
Yeah.
life stuff that you dealt with, and in my mind I'm thinking, how
Yeah.
hard is that? I would imagine it would have probably been hard had you not healed to even do that, because every time you were asked to step into one of those roles, and even though it was quote unquote acting on television per se, because you had that going, because you have a past experience with that, that would have been hard for you to really get into that role and serve in it effectively. But because you have healed, because you have been able to move forward, in terms of that healing process, it allows you to be able to step even into that role and actually positively contribute to the role, to because you're living in it differently than what you would have been had you not healed. But I just thought that was ironic as you were sharing that story, like she went
Oh,
through it
well,
like a
yes,
for
that's a
real,
good
like she
point.
could have her own episode, like
That's hilarious. Well, let me clarify this part. As far as with that, when I do the true crime stuff, I'm there from the psychologist
hmm
perspective. and not one of the reenactment perspectives.
Right,
So
right.
it does get deep, okay, when we have those kind of, when I'm reviewing the cases and things, and that's how I can identify with the things on a fatal attraction or,
Hmm.
any of that, simply because I have been on the other end of what it's like to when somebody really can be dangerous, for you, in terms of a relationship that just went haywire. And again, the flags are always there, the signs are always
Hmm.
there, and we just overlook them or justify them or explain them away. So when I work in true crime, it definitely is, a different type of situation, because I now, from my maturity, my experience, my wisdom, I'm able to look and say, yeah, and that's what I would tell younger women, like, look, pay attention. And also, too, here's something that therapy helped me to be able to get to the bottom of, was how I was able to allow myself to get into that situation. It was because, number one, on our first date, I told him so much information. So he was listening, taking notes mentally, and knowing exactly what buttons to push, what strings to
Hmm.
pull, just to be able to know how to play on my vulnerabilities. And one of the things that I remember was because, as I stated earlier, my parents were teenagers and they were never married. So when my mom married someone else and we lived overseas and we were traveling all over the place, I didn't get to see my dad that much. I would talk to him on the phone and things like that, but I didn't physically live in the same state as my dad, period, since I was a very little girl. And so to me, it was that sense of wanting someone who would never leave me, someone who would love me and never leave me. And I thought that's what my ex-husband was. I thought he would
Hmm.
be that person who would never leave. I thought he'd be loyal. I thought he'd be whatever. But I ignored his trauma as well, because he actually didn't have a good relationship with his mother. So his images of women, his perception of women was tainted before I even came along. And so I ended up getting the end of his trauma, meaning his mom had 3 kids with 3 different men, and he said to me straight up that he thought she was a whore. And that was something that was shocking to me. I'd never heard anyone say something
Let that
like
mother.
that about their own mother,
Yeah.
but he did. And then his sister also had 3 kids by 3 different men. So he didn't think highly of her. So their relationships weren't close. And then in addition to that, when he had that ex-girlfriend that he thought was cheating on him and he kicked her door in, these are all things that I knew before I married this guy. And it didn't click that, hey, this, there will be something, because he didn't trust. And he was very smothering and very controlling, very jealous.
Hmm.
I remember going to like an event, and they were giving out these calendars of like men, like for promotional purposes. I got that calendar, I threw it in my trunk. He found that calendar, and I literally forgot about it. It was just a promo item. He saw that calendar, he ripped it up. He was so upset. It wasn't a nude calendar or anything. It was literally just a calendar. I was like, what are you doing? Spazzing out, and I couldn't go anywhere without him. Literally, I couldn't go anywhere without him. And that's not an exaggeration. If I wasn't going to work, I couldn't go anywhere without him. I would go get mani pedis, and he'd have to be right there with me. He would go get a mani pedi too, because he didn't trust me to be out of his sight.
Hmm.
And I remember one night, these ladies from work were like, hey, we have a card game that we play or something, just women. We just come on, you're invited. I was like, okay, sure. So for most people, that would be simple. I told him, hey, these ladies at work, they play these cards. I'm just going to go over there. This is where it is. That man held me phone hostage from the time I left the driveway all the way until I made it there. He would not let me get off the phone. He wanted to hear who was there. it was the most insane thing I had ever experienced. It was so stressful that I was just like, I can't even have a good time. And that was his intention. He didn't want me to have a good time because he wasn't there. And so, it was that type of thing where I could not get rid of this person. The level of psychological damage that he did, it was like he would call me even like just repeatedly. Like I remember, and this is the honest to God's truth. I remember one night when this before we got married, we were engaged or something, and it might have been 4 months into us knowing each other. I distinctly remember that one night he could not reach me on the phone because I was with a study group, and then I went to bed. He called me like 34 times in a row and kept leaving these progressive messages. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? And that, I mean, called me until wee hours of the morning. And only when I got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, I was like, what in the world? And and finally it was like, what is wrong with you? But here's the thing. What was wrong with
Mm-hmm.
me to accept
Yeah.
this? I
And,
can't even put it on him. It wasn't even a what's wrong with you. It's what is wrong with me that I'm
mm-hmm.
allowing this foolishness to happen. So, you know, to go back to what you said about forgiveness, I forgave him a long time ago. And I don't have any upset with my family members that still are in communication with him or follow him on social media because they don't know. I never told them. So they have no reason to believe that he was anything other than what they knew him to be. And that was the guy who was always at every family event, you know, ingratiating himself into the family to be a part of our family because he didn't have one that was close of his own.
Wow. And like you said, it was just, and unless you, and again, I'm sure some of our listeners, unfortunately, have had this a similar experience where unless you know what it's like to be in a relationship that is smothering, where the person is super possessive,
Hmm.
I've only experienced that once in life,
And it's
and
enough.
it wears you out.
I'm
Like when
trying to
everywhere
tell you.
every
It
move you make,
was.
where you at? What you doing? Where you going? Where you going? Your phone?
Yes.
Who's this? You
Oh
know? It's
my
like
goodness. Yes. Yes.
and like at first you kind of go along with it, and after a while you're like, well, why you keep
Yes.
asking me? Why like you said, why you spazzing out? Why you
Yes.
what sign did I give you to suggest that I was even,
Right.
if anything, you're
Absolutely.
encouraging me to go do all this as much as you accusing me
Yep.
of doing whatever. I might as well,
Absolutely.
but
Hmm.
like you said,
That's true
it
though.
can be a dangerous situation,
Yes.
because for some people in those relationships it's just an annoyance. For other people,
Hmm.
unfortunately, it becomes violent, and and in the most extreme
Hmm.
cases, it can end life for some people because of
That's
that
right.
possessiveness. And to your point,
Hmm.
you had your own challenges, and again, you didn't really
Hmm.
understand it at the time, but it was kind of like you talked about your dad. It's like
Yes.
my parents were not married, but I still had a
Hmm.
relationship with my dad. And
Hmm.
here now I'm having this period of time where he's not physically around, missing that intimacy
Yeah.
with my dad. So then here comes this
Yes.
guy who, in his
Hmm.
own way, was kind of replacing. He was not so much that he was replacing your dad, but he
Hmm.
was the intimacy piece of it, the closeness. He was making me feel what I was
Yeah.
missing from dad. So it caused you to kind of
Hmm.
tolerate
Yes.
the obsessive craziness that he was
Yes.
offering, and but you were justifying it, calling it, oh, he just loves me really a whole
Right.
lot. he just
Hmm.
he just
Hmm.
it's because he grew up in a family that they didn't have the same love as I did, so I'm letting
Yes.
it ride. I'm not knowing all along
Hmm.
that it's like you said,
Yep.
you're kind of putting yourself in a position, and that's not to blame you, but it was kind of creating this environment where he's just feeding off of that, and it's
Yes.
elevating more and more and more in terms of his obsessiveness and possessiveness
Hmm.
and control issues and all
Yes.
of those things. So we gotta, if there's anything to sum it all up,
Hmm.
you gotta pay attention to the signs, and
Yeah.
again, to take it even to another level, the beauty about being in a relationship with God is that He will give you those indicators as to when something is not right, and He will
Yes.
also give you that pathway to get up out
Hmm.
of that. But
Yes.
at the same time, if we don't listen, if we don't open our
Mm-hmm.
minds up to listen to what he has to say, there are scenarios where he will allow it to play out. Not
That's
because he's
right.
looking for you to be harmed, not because he's
Mm-hmm.
looking for you to be, possibly killed or anything like that, but he has
Right.
to let it play out to a point so that you can ultimately arrive at a moment where it's bigger than you, to where you can't fix this. You
Right.
had you had to, as we all say, you had to have that come to Jesus moment where
Oh,
you
for sure.
said,
For
"Okay,
sure.
Lord, I don't know what to do," and you
Mm-hmm.
shared that earlier. You was like, I found
Yes.
myself, I'm praying, Lord, what,
Mm-hmm.
show me the way out. I don't know anymore.
Absolutely.
I tried this,
Yes.
I tried that. Sometimes He has to
Mm-hmm.
allow our storms to manifest, if you will,
Yeah.
just to get our attention, not so much to torture
Absolutely.
us, but to get our attention. And then once He has our attention, He's like,
Yes.
okay, now that you're listening to me, Dwan,
Mm-hmm.
let me lay it out for you what you do. And you follow through with that, and ultimately, thank God, you were able to safely exit what was
Ah,
otherwise a tumultuous,
yes.
trying, traumatic type of relationship. So,
Mm-hmm.
again, listeners, and again, this applies to both women and men. Please pay attention to the cues. Don't let your pride
Yeah.
get in the way. Don't let your rationalizations, overtake sound thinking,
Mm-hmm.
sound wisdom. And I think the other thing that I want to take away from everything that you said is, I do appreciate the fact that you sought out therapy to
Oh,
help you deal with
absolutely.
all of this. As you, I'm sure you know, doing the works that you do,
Mm-hmm.
we in general, as a community of people, have for decades been anti therapy,
Right.
because that was for crazy people. That was for,
Right.
people who ain't who,
Mm-hmm.
who ain't in their right mind, that kind of stuff. When in
Yeah.
fact, therapy can be very helpful, well beyond what you can ever imagine. And I didn't come to that realization until a couple of years ago, where I was at a point in life
Mm-hmm.
where I had to tap into it and give it a try. And I'm
Yes.
glad that I did. And it gave me a whole new perspective on that. If then
Mm-hmm.
again, every therapist is not equal. You do
Right.
have to be
That
selective.
right.
you know
Yeah, no,
and,
that's
and
true.
preferably, I
Mm-hmm.
would encourage anybody to, don't just get the therapist just because they got the doctor or a couple of initials, abbreviations after their name, but also, what is their
Mm-hmm.
foundational basis. So, you
There
know
we go.
do
Yeah.
we have are you a therapist with a Christian background, so you can kind of
Right.
tap into me, not only from
Mm-hmm.
what you know in your books, but from what you know
That's
about
right.
him, because those
Absolutely.
two combined together, you're
Yes.
offering me a therapy experience that's at the level that I needed to be at. and
Yeah.
and I think that's the other takeaway that I also want to bring out of this situation. And you
Mm-hmm.
didn't mention it, and I don't know if you all, I know you ultimately said that he was pursuing his, license to be a
He's a
pastor and
minister.
all of
Yeah,
that, but
he's a
you know
minister.
you also, to all of my listeners, take the
Mm-hmm.
time when you're talking in that meet and greet.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of you kind of telling all your business per se, we're not saying to be shut down and don't expose anything, but you don't want to just be the talker, and just pouring out all your
Yeah.
life experience and everything, your whole life story to people.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to ask some key questions. Find
Absolutely.
out, and one of the critical key questions that you probably should be knowing about: where do they stand in terms of relationship with God? Where are
Mm-hmm.
they at? Because that's going to tell you a whole lot right there. Again, not that they're perfect, saintly, free of sin. We're not talking about that. Do they have a relationship? Are they trying to do that? Because there's a reason why we've been advised in God's word about being equally yoked. If you're not equally yoked, I don't care what they're talking about, what they're saying. If they're not in a true relationship, because a person who's truly trying to have a relationship with God is not going to, in the same breath, going upside your head. It's not going to be in the same breath, acting in a way that is, out of alignment with how he would expect his daughter, how he would expect his son to be treated, in a relationship. Again, those are all key questions and key conversations to have early on, before all the I love you, before all of the intimacy and the spending the nights and doing things that we all know, of course, and that's a whole nother
For
subject
sure.
for a different day. But all
Mm-hmm.
doing all the stuff that gets us caught up in our emotions and feelings and all of that. Let's talk logic. Let's talk foundational. Like, where can we build on from this? Or are we just physically attracted to each other, and it's nothing more than that. Pay attention to what people are saying. Don't dismiss it. Don't overlook it. Don't, they just, no, when people tell you, as I say, when people tell you who they are,
Believe that.
you better believe it.
And also too, just to piggyback on what you were saying, because yes, the relationship with God is extremely important. But here's the kicker part of that is that a lot of times people are gravitating toward God when they have not yet done their homework for their healing, when
Mhm.
they are, they're searching for something. And when someone does their healing and they have the relationship with God, that's the solid foundation. But when someone is still searching, kind of like a babe in Christ, like when they're just learning, they're just whatever, then it's like, okay, but there's still work to do. We have to mature. We have to mature as people. And we have to be able to make those good decisions, because that was another thing that drew me in, was because of me being a Christian person. I went to a Christian high school. I graduated from a Christian high school. And so I always, and even when I was a little kid, I had a foundation of God, a relationship with God. So I was a person of faith. So when I met this guy who was this, he wasn't a minister at the time that we met, he became a minister a few years in, but he knew like a lot about a lot of things, like in terms of, he didn't graduate from college, but he was very well read. He read a lot of books. And so he had a lot of intelligence, and he also knew the word of God. And one thing that he would do when he had something going on, he would ask me to pray with him. And one thing he would always say is, you know, I want you to be my prayer partner, because when you and I pray together, prayers get answered. And so it made me think, okay, God, are you in this? Like, is this a sign? Maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe I don't know, like before the marriage, it was
Mhm.
that, it was that confusing signal, because it was just like, on the one hand, he is this Christian presenting person. Then on the other hand, he's intelligent. And then I'm getting this information, but then I'm seeing all these things. And for me, I never was like, he was not somebody that, like, when I first met him, was like, oh my goodness. Like, to me, he wasn't my usual type. Like, he didn't look like a guy that I would normally date or something. He
Mhm.
just wasn't. But I was attracted to his mind, his intellect. That was the one draw that connected us, because I was, as I stated, I was working on my bachelor's degree at that time. So I was like in that mode. I was always a person who was aware of education, and I wanted someone who was intelligent. And although he didn't have a college degree, his intellect was unmatched. Like, he really could give me that talking. And if I had to do it all over again, one thing I would say is that definitely we never should have been a romantic couple. We probably should have just been good friends. If we could have just been good friends, then I wouldn't have had to deal with all that other stuff. And then we could have still, stimulated each other intellectually, like
Mhm.
that type of stuff. So, and also too,
Yeah.
I would tell
Yeah. And
anybody to make sure that you are prayerful about the type of relationship it is that you're supposed to have with someone, and not just assume that it's supposed to be romantic, or like marriage or anything. Sometimes people come into your life just to be your friend.
mhm. Yeah. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because a lot of
Mhm,
times we can get caught up and go 0 to 100
mhm,
because somebody walked up to us and said, "Hey, what's your name?" and all that. Like, oh, he's the one.
absolutely.
She's the one.
Mhm.
You don't even
No,
know their last name yet. You
right.
haven't even had a chance to have
Yes.
any kind of regular
Mhm,
basic conversation. Already are envisioning the honeymoon and the
mhm.
kids and the
Right.
slow down,
Put
take
in
your
the cart before
time.
the horse, and
Yeah,
I always tell my daughter when she's dating someone, I always tell her, you have to see the seasons of a person. See the
hmm
seasons. You need to see them when they're angry. You need to see them when they're upset. You need to see what they're like, how they handle sadness, or like if something happens, disappointment, how they handle this stuff. Not just them being happy and, all of this, but you have to see the seasons of a person to really get to know a person. That's what I always recommend.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because, like you said, we'll get
Mhm,
caught up in because everybody in the beginning, when you're attracted, we all try to say the
mhm.
right things and do the right things. But if you
Of
let
course,
enough time go by, where the newness wears off, where they start to get comfortable,
there you
and
go.
that's on both sides. Then that's when
Mhm.
I start talking like I really talk. That's when I start
There you
acting
go.
like I really act. you know.
Absolutely.
And so you get to see what part of what I was
Hmm.
talking about or doing in the beginning is actually authentic, and what part of it was me just trying to impress you, kind of
Right.
thing. And that
Because
doesn't
then
mean
the
that it still
mask
can't.
kind of starts
Yeah,
coming
the
off,
mask. Yeah, because
you're
I'm
like,
comfortable.
oh,
Yeah, oh, we
yes,
comfortable now, so now I can.
there you go.
Now I'm
Hmm.
gonna get a little bit more loose with my mouth, more
There
with
you
my
go.
words. I'm gonna get a
Right.
little
That
bit more
type of
loose
stuff.
with my behavior, you know.
Yes.
And again, we can all be guilty of that, and as long as it's not too far off
Yeah.
guard from the beginning, you could still be okay. But for some
Right.
people, they're kind of putting up the front for the purposes of kind of making you be
Hmm.
in a vulnerable situation so they can get you where they want you, and
Right.
then they're now moving in a way that's not healthy, that's not productive, that's not
Right.
safe. Yeah, in
Hmm.
some cases. So again,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
this is great conversation, and again, I truly do appreciate your being
Thank
transparent in
you.
this is something that many
Thank
people are dealing with. Listeners, I
hmm.
know at some point in life have dealt with it, or maybe currently dealing with that right now, and so this is definitely a conversation that we need to have, and just be mindful and again listen to God. Stay connected with
Oh,
Him,
yeah.
and understand what He's trying to give you those nuggets of wisdom, trying to give you that
Hmm.
direction, trying to give you the flags, the warning signs. So
Absolutely.
so you
Pay
so you don't
attention.
pay attention, pay attention.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so Dewan, obviously, we've discussed some very heavy stuff, and sometimes again, storms can be heavy like that.
Sure.
Storms can also be the simple lifing type stuff, whether it's a unexpected
Hmm.
car repair, a bill that we didn't see coming, or somebody got on your nerves at work or whatever, and it's got you on edge. But with that said, I'm curious to know from you, when you do find yourself facing moments of challenge, moments of adversity, what is it that you particularly like to do that kind of helps you stay locked in and focused as you're, kind of working through whatever that challenge or situation is? You like, what if you have a certain routine, certain regimen, certain things that just are things that you like to do or tap into that helps you to process it all?
Sure. There's quite a few things that I do. Depending on the struggle or the challenge, I read more scripture.
Mm.
Like I read scripture daily, but I read more scripture, something like that. Pray more, because the word says pray without ceasing. So, instead of your usual, thank you, Lord, for waking me up today in the morning when you get out the bed, and then the prayer you say before you go to bed, throughout the day, like, hey, Father, I'm not doing too good right now. I don't like this or whatever, guide me, or I'll journal. I'll go for walks. I'll go outside. Some things for my mental health that I like to do is just go outside with nature instead of staying in the house, because when you're thinking a lot, or when whatever's going on in your mind, it can feel overwhelming and all consuming. So I go outside and get some fresh air, go barefoot on the grass. You just go all the way with that, and or sometimes I'll just sit in my backyard and just let the sun just do its thing and feel it and appreciate nature. And then I go into a gratitude mode of how beautiful everything is, thanking God for his creation and how beautiful stuff is, just the fresh air, just, just seeing the birds chirping, or, a bee flying by or whatever, just anything. And just realizing the miracles that are right there that go on in the earth that we don't even see, but it's happening to keep us okay. I go into a gratitude mode, things like that. I'm very aware of my emotions and how I feel. So when I need to relax and unwind, I will say, okay, girl, you need to take that moment, go journal, or go take a relaxing bath, or, something to unwind. But it's always something dealing with self care.
Love that. Love that. A couple things that I take away from what you just said. You talked about praying more and reading more scripture. What that says to me, in just in those two segments right there, is that you are a person who you don't wait until a storm comes
Mm-mm.
before you begin to prepare for the storm. So when you spoke about, and I'm hoping my listeners caught this, she says she reads more scripture, which means she's already reading scripture every day. So she's staying in
There you
God's
go.
word daily. She prays
Yeah,
more,
there
which
you go.
means she's already praying. So it
Yeah.
doesn't have to. Nothing has to be going on that is a quote unquote
Hmm.
storm. She's
Right.
already doing these practices as a regular, consistent part of her day. Um,
Absolutely.
she's keeping her mental health, her own personal self care in mind daily. She just
Hmm.
elevates it a little bit more. she
Yeah.
elevates the frequency or the duration of the conversations that she's having with God
Mhm.
a little bit more when something is going on that might,
Mm.
as you said, maybe not making you feel so good today. You're feeling a little off
Right.
today and feeling some
Yeah.
kind of way. Like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, God, what's up with you today? I thought we was
Right.
good,
Yeah. You got
so,
it.
so
Mhm.
I love that you speak to the importance of you staying ready, so that way when the
Mhm.
storm comes, instead of you being reactive to it, you're allowed
Right.
to actually be responsive to it. And there is a clear difference, because when I'm reactive, then now I'm reactive. I'm likely to do knee jerk,
Mhm.
movements. Whether
Right.
it's knee jerk in something that I say, knee jerk in something that I
Mhm.
do, which might
Yeah.
end up actually making things worse than they needed
Right.
to be. Whereas if I'm already armored up, I'm already prayed up, I'm already scriptured up, because
Mhm.
I'm staying in tune. I'm maintaining that level of intimacy with God, and consistently
Mhm.
working on that relationship. When stuff does come, he and I
Right.
are already in a place where we're
Yeah.
we're we're, we're already talking. Now I'm just
Absolutely.
introducing a little bit more to the conversation and saying, okay, what should I do
Mhm.
with this? Where should I, how should I
Yeah.
process this? Where should I go with this? The other thing
Mhm.
that I love about what you said, and I don't know if you paid attention to the title of our show today. Your title is reflecting on gratitude, and you spoke about gratitude. It's
Mm.
really
Yeah.
important um, for you to take moments, again, whether there's storms going on or not, for us to always have that reflecting moment, that reflection on gratitude. Because,
Yes.
what the enemy wants you to do in the midst of a storm is he wants you to focus on everything that is wrong. How you
Mhm.
feeling, the inconvenience, the frustration. He wants you to get caught up in all of that.
Right.
Whereas the appropriate way, the godly way that we're supposed to approach storms is that instead of making that storm be all about what's wrong, and
Mhm.
and us being the victim, we should be thankful even in the midst of the storm. That's what
That's
we
right.
talk about, counting it all joy. Even
Yeah.
in spite of the storm, we're supposed to be
Mhm.
thankful. So instead of me saying, being all bent out of shape about this financial challenge that I find myself facing,
Right.
I got this in front of me, Lord, but you know what? I'm so
Mhm.
grateful that that I actually have a means to be able to try to address it. I
Right.
might be dealing with some stuff right now, Lord, but you know what? I'm so glad that I got shelter and clothes in the closet and food on the
Absolutely.
shelf and transportation in the garage. Because even in my stuff that I got happening right now,
Mhm.
it pales in comparison to all the stuff that is going well in my
Mhm.
life, and I owe all of that to you. So
Right.
before I let my day be dominated, before I let
Yes.
my heart and my mind be dominated by this inconvenience, because to you, Lord, it's just a minor inconvenience, and I
Mhm.
want to think of it the same way. I don't want to make it my focal point of attention that it dominates my day,
Right.
because now I'm robbing myself of my peace. I'm robbing myself of my joy. I'm robbing myself of that calm that I could
Mhm.
otherwise be experiencing if I just, again, stay consistent in the things that we talked about, but also
Yeah.
just not allowing the crazy of life, the storms of life to get the best of me. That I'm
Mhm.
always staying grateful in
Yeah.
spite of whatever's going on. I'm still grateful, Lord. I don't feel
That's right.
well today, but I'm still grateful. I, I,
Yes.
I don't have as much money as I wish I had, but I'm still grateful. you,
Absolutely.
you know, I don't
Mhm.
I don't always have the answers to the challenges and problems in my life, but I'm grateful that
Mhm.
that I am in my right mind to even sit down and think about it and be able to
Yes.
communicate with you and be able to receive whatever it is that you have to share with me, so I know what to do. So
Absolutely.
that just stood out to me when you spoke about gratitude, because oftentimes we forget that piece in the
Yes.
middle of our storms. So.
Thank you for highlighting that. One thing I have found is to thank God for the things I have and for the things I do not have.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people don't understand what that entails. It's like, no, you thank God for everything you do have, but boy, the things you don't have, be glad you don't. Be grateful for that because, there's somebody that's battling cancer right now. If that's not your situation, be thankful that you're not battling that right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that's going through some real serious, deep, heavy stuff. And if, as my dad always says, if you got a problem that money can fix, you really don't have a problem. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, because you can always get more money, You can always, because at the end of the day, there are resources, there are people, there's somebody that could just be one person away from blessing you. You could ask someone to give you money to help you pay something, and somebody, if you've, built up those relationships and connections and you're a credible person, somebody will give it to you. But when it comes down to things that money can't fix, like, real health problems, challenges going on, there are people that's in real dire straits right now. And if that's not your situation, you have to ask yourself, what am I really even complaining about? Some stuff might look away, but it doesn't mean that it is that way. And there's two women that I remember meeting, and both women I met when I worked in education, when I was a college professor. And one lady had a son, one lady had a daughter. And they were both, at that time, their children were adults, like young adults, like early 20s. And at different times, those women both lost their only children,
Mm.
like tragic circumstance, like car accident, that sort of situation. And I remember asking, how do you continue? Like, how do you even keep going? They're like, only by the grace of God. They went through a lot of crying, a lot of, whatever. But I say that to say that sometimes people get upset with their kids and they just like, why even, I've heard some of the worst extremes you can imagine. Like people, why did I even bother to have a kid or why this? And to me, I'm just like, the fact that you know where your kid is. You know how many people who have kids that are missing? How many people who kids didn't make it? How many people that can't even have kids that desperately want them? You got to do better. Like, appreciate what you have and thank God for the things you do. Like, you might not live in a big mansion, but you got a space over your head. You might not eat steak every night, but you still have some sustenance that's allowing you to keep going. So, to be grateful for the little things, then we prepare ourselves to be ready for the fullness and the bigger, greater things when we recognize that if we can just be satisfied
Yeah.
with where we are in terms of, I might not be where I want to be, but where I am today, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm right where I need to be at this moment in time. And if we really realize that, it would make a tremendous difference. Not being satisfied to the point where you don't do anything else, but satisfied in the point of realizing that, yeah, I'm right where I need to be in this moment.
Yeah, and I love you how you distinguish that because don't confuse being satisfied with being complacent.
There we go.
Because when you're complacent,
Hmm.
when you that signifies that you're stagnant,
Right.
that you're lacking movement. Satisfying is again is more connected to the gratitude. I'm thankful for what I
Yes.
have. I'm satisfied. If God doesn't
Hmm.
give me any bigger of a house, if He doesn't increase my paycheck by
Hmm.
another dollar, if I never eat, you know. A certain kind of meal ever again. The fact that he's never allowed me to starve to death. He's never allowed me to be homeless. He's never allowed me to be
Hmm.
transportationalist. He's never allowed
Hmm.
me to be without a job to a degree that it put
Yes.
me in dire straits. He's
Right.
never allowed me to experience a health challenge that was,
Hmm.
unrecoverable from. I mean,
Right.
again,
Hmm.
that gratitude, that gratefulness, when you
Right.
can, when that can be your normal way of thinking, your mindset, your behavior, God
Hmm.
appreciates that. He respects that, and he will
Yes.
bless you well beyond because he knows that again, you're not making it about you. And
Hmm.
and that's another thing too that we have to think about with our storms. And I've been talking about this a lot lately. Is that and just reminding myself as well is that a lot of the storms that we go through, it's not even about us even anyway. It's not.
Right.
It was never even about us. A lot of
Yes.
what God allows us to go through in terms of storms, He's allowing us to go through it because He's
Hmm.
preparing us to be able to bless somebody else. He allowed
Absolutely.
you to go through your storm of your first marriage. It was not about you. It was about
Right.
to position you for the people
Yep.
that he was setting you up for down the road in your
Yeah.
coaching, in your speaking, in your writing, that
Hmm.
you're going to be able to pour into because of the experience that you have. You've now become relatable to them. But you wouldn't have been
Absolutely.
able to be relatable to them. You would have just been another writer, just another speaker, just another
Right.
coach. If you don't have
Yeah.
a personal experience to
Hmm.
tap into, a personal testimony to tap
Right.
into, to be able to connect with the people who are going through these same things. Some of our listeners, they're going to be able to
Hmm.
relate to you because you done been there. You're not just telling them
Hmm.
something, giving them some feel good message, and they're sitting by.
Hmm.
You don't know what I done been through. Yeah, she does. because she's
Right.
experienced it herself. Not to say that her experience is
Absolutely.
exactly like yours, but
Yeah.
she knows what it feels like to be in those type of situations. So that gratitude, that gratefulness is so key. And just one last thing,
Mm-hmm.
a part of, and I share this from time to time. A part of my prayer every day is I thank God for my no's when He tells me no,
Yeah. Yes.
because and again, as you shared earlier, it sounds crazy when you talk about thanking God for no's or thanking God for
Mm-hmm.
the things that He doesn't give you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those no's, I appreciate the no's more than I even do the yeses, because
Oh, for
you,
sure.
you just spared me from something that maybe I
Yeah.
didn't realize. You saved me from
Mm-hmm.
that trap that I would have otherwise fallen into. You know,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
saved me from, just going to your story that you told tonight. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
maybe save me from that encounter with someone, or that encounter with a particular experience that it looked good on the outside, but because you saw what was behind the layers of it all,
Mm-hmm.
you stopped me in my tracks. You said you interceded for me so I wouldn't get caught up in
Yeah.
something that, even though it looked good and it sounded good,
Right.
it was saying and doing all the right things.
Yes.
No, no, I got better for you.
Absolutely.
No, this is not going to be what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just be patient. Just hold on and watch me do something that when you see
Yeah.
this, that's going to look like like it was worthless
Mm-hmm.
compared to what I got for you. All I need you to do is just ride with me. Just be patient.
Yeah.
Just follow my timing. Understand my time is not your time. My way is
Yep.
not your way. If you believe in that, if you feel it,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna always come out on top. Because I don't lose. I don't
Mm-hmm.
lose. I don't make mistakes. Who better to
Yeah.
ride with on that? Who better to follow
Yeah.
that lead on that? So it's just, again, the
Yeah.
gratitude piece is so critical. I'm thankful that you brought that up. So
Thank you.
Dewan, if you, as you reflect on all your experiences, the good, the bad, and everything in between, if you
Mm-hmm.
had an opportunity to speak to the younger Dewan, the Dewan who didn't understand her full worth, her full value, the Dewan that was, you know, um, not understanding, what her true purpose in life was supposed to be, not
Mm-hmm.
understanding how it was possible for somebody to appear, to come in her life and appear to be all the right things, but yet there were
Mm-hmm.
signs and there were triggers that you struggled to pay attention to. If
Right.
you could, if you can impart some words of wisdom that you wish younger Dewan would have known, or even to our listeners who might be struggling right now, whether it be in relationships that they're in that are not
Mm-hmm.
healthy, or just adversity and challenges in general, just not knowing how to pick, be mindful of the signs and the cues, and just where do I begin, where do I start to kind of overcome whatever burdens, whatever challenges I'm finding myself up against. What would be your words of encouragement or inspiration to younger Dewan or to them?
Wow. Okay. Trust your gut. It'll never lead you wrong. And don't be so concerned about being nice or hurting other people's feelings or any of that at the expense of your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
Love that. That because what you just spoke to is, and I've been guilty of it myself, is this people pleasing mentality.
Mm-hmm.
People pleasing. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't
Right.
want to offend anybody. And we're not
Yeah.
talking. And we're not talking about people you just outright being rude and disrespectful to folks. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we'll get so caught up and so concerned about how everybody else thinks and how everybody else feels that we
Right.
do it at the expense of being concerned about our own feelings, about our own,
Absolutely.
our own bound. I don't want to
Yeah.
cross any. I don't want to cross them anyway. You
Yeah.
more concerned and respectful of their boundaries than you are of your own. You know,
Absolutely.
you let
Yeah.
them have free will and do whatever they want to on your end,
Mm-hmm.
but you real cautious and about how I don't want to step on their toes, but they love
Mm-hmm.
slamming
Stepping
their
on
foot on
yours.
yours,
Right. Exactly.
and you accept it as okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yes.
teaching them how to treat you.
Absolutely.
So again, you hit it short and sweet to the point. Trust your
Mhm.
instincts, trust your gut, pay attention to the cues, pay attention to the signs,
Yeah.
and take that first step. Take that first step
Mm-hmm.
forward to being able to break up out of that. And again, if you find
Yeah.
yourself struggling in that area, which many times you will, again, this is where that relationship with God plays in, because He can give you
Yeah.
that strength, He can give you that courage to make the first
Mm-hmm.
step. Once you get moving and making those
Right.
steps and following His lead, it becomes easier and easier. The steps become easier. The process becomes faster moving along. But you gotta take
Mm-hmm.
that leap of faith. You gotta go out there and be courageous and trusting. We're not talking about put yourself in harm's way or anything like that. We're not saying do
Mm-mm.
that, but follow the cues, just like we were telling you to follow the warning signs. You also
Mm,
want to follow those signs, those words, those cues that God gives us to give you that
totally.
guidance and give you that direction. Don't ignore Him because He
Mm,
knows. He's the ultimate one who has all the knowledge on the best way to handle a situation. So always keep
yeah.
that in mind. Yes,
And
yes.
just like I had mentioned previously about me having a dream, like leading up to the couple of weeks before, and it was telling me everything was like, you're doing, this is not it. And I even said it to my mom, but I ignored everything and even my own dreams and just were like, you know what, maybe I am just, maybe it is just nerves, maybe it is just cold feet,
Mm-hmm.
like she said, that kind of thing. But pay attention. Your intuition is there for a reason. When there
Mm-hmm.
are signs, pay attention. That's what I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dewan, this has been a fabulous conversation. I knew it would be, and it is exceeded expectations. I
Thank
thoroughly
you.
enjoyed everything that you've shared. Again, appreciating your transparency, your willingness and openness to share as you have,
My pleasure.
so authentically. It really does matter, and as I said, I and it's come to be true. You have blessed me. You've blessed my listeners in being
Thank
so
you.
open as you have, and I do appreciate that. But as is customary here on the Blessings and Streets podcast, before we let you go, we do want to take an opportunity to celebrate you, to love on you, to acknowledge you, to lift you up. So if you got anything
Thank
that's
you.
going on now or coming
Yes.
up down the road, whether it's professionally and or personally, please
Mhm.
do share that with us. We want to celebrate that, lift it up. We want to know how to
Thank
follow you,
you.
keep in touch with you, and all of that good stuff. How we can be of support. So, what do we need to be looking forward to that Dewan's got going on that we need to be in the know about?
All right.
What's happening with you? What we need to
I
be in the
love
know
that.
about?
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you. I still am doing the shows for my man, Fail Attraction, Celebrity Crime Files. You can follow me on my website to see when the shows are coming out. Dwan Abrams, that's Dwan, like think of a swan, but with a D. DWAN Abrams, ABRAMS.TV. That is my website, DwanAbrams.tv. I also am the founder and executive director of Unleash Your Inner Worth Incorporated. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dealing with women's empowerment. We just had our first annual summit and gala, and it was a phenomenal experience, life changing, transformative. And we'll be doing other things throughout the year. So that website is just unleashyourinnerworth.com, and you can see what we got going on there. You can also follow me on all social media at Dwan Abrams, DWAN ABRAMS. So I'm the same on all of those. And I just signed with a new literary agent. Yay! So I have a nonfiction book that will be coming out. So stay tuned for that. It's very interesting. It has a true crime undertone to it. So I'm very excited about it. I can't speak on it too much because we are in the position of getting it shopped. So, but trust, know, and believe, I will be announcing that. So I've got that. So my book that'll be coming out, as well as just things with my nonprofit organization. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome, awesome. And if you would, real quick, share about the organization that actually allowed you and I to actually come to know one another.
Oh
If you would share.
yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I don't know how I forgot that. Ro Alpha. That is a Christian for well for creatives. It's not just for writers or anything. It's a fraternity and a sorority. So it's Ro Alpha Tau, Christian Christian writers fraternity slash sorority. I think I'm saying that right. But the initials are PAT, PAT, the Greek letters. Okay, so yes, absolutely. I am the dean of membership for that organization as well. So definitely check that out if you're a Christian creative. You don't have to just be a creative. You can be a minister. You can be a Christian. Just anything that you do in terms of glorifying the kingdom with your gifts and talents. So, whether you have a nonprofit organization, or you're a minister at a church, or you're a writer, an entertainer, we've got musicians, we've got New York Times bestselling authors, we've got a bunch of people that belong to this organization. So, absolutely, and more ways to
Awesome.
give back. Hmm.
All right, all right. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You've got a chance to hear Dwan's story, a wonderful story, a wonderful journey that she's on. You know how to connect with her, how to support with her, tap into her products and services that she has available. Follow her along accordingly. She's just scratching the surface of all the wonderful and exciting things that she's a part of. And if nothing more, keep her lifted in prayer for God's
Thank you.
favor over her life and everything that she's doing for her family, for her strength, for her energy, for everything that she needs to have in order to stay locked in and focused on again what God has created her for, to walking into that purpose and impacting the lives of many all over this world. So again, it's been a pleasure, Dewan, having you on the show. And to my listeners, if you've enjoyed our podcast today, you've been inspired, you've been encouraged, please support, please subscribe, share, like, comment, because this is what the Blessings in the Streets podcast is all about. Again, it's all about inspiring. It's all about encouraging, uplifting, being vulnerable, as you've seen us be today, sharing pieces of our stories. Again, not looking for applause or anything like that, but just hoping that you can draw some gems, some nuggets from what we share and apply it to your respective lives and be able to better approach dealing with adversities and challenges and anything of the like. But it all begins, and we can't say this enough, can't emphasize this enough. It all begins with that relationship with God. And if you don't currently have that, I'm here to tell you that today is a mighty fine day to make that decision. It'll be the best decision that you will ever make in life. He loves you unconditionally. He wants that intimacy with you, wants that closeness with you. He's willing to take all those burdens, lay them on him. He wants to show you that in his love that he can work those things out. You just have to trust and believe and have faith and just watch him do miraculous and awesome things in your life. He will not let you down. He is undefeated and he wants nothing but the best for you. We're not sharing something with you that we heard. We're telling you something that we know from firsthand experiences. If he can do it for us in our imperfection, in our flawed ways, he can certainly do the same for you. So we want everybody to enjoy and experience what that relationship is like, and which is why we proudly and boldly share it with you. So with that said, remember, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and I thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, remember to continue to fight that good fight, continue to lean on God, nurture, blossom that relationship, become more and more intimate, become more trusting and loving and dependent upon him. Let him guide your steps. Again, he will not lead you astray. He will not steer you in the wrong paths. And not only will you receive the many blessings that he has for you, but he will equip you to be able to bestow many blessings upon uh, many around you in your life, both people that you know as well as strangers that you are going to encounter down the road. So again, don't take that lightly. That relationship matters. It's very important. So until next time, you take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great rest of your evening.